You're listening to the Swap Society podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Robertson. I interview thought leaders and change makers who are working to create a more sustainable and equitable world through fashion, art, and activism. Join us for a dose of climate optimism as we envision a brighter future. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Swap Society podcast. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of talking with Maria Lopez. She is a Reiki master and spiritual life coach of Ascending Arts on Instagram. We'll link to all of that in the notes. And she also happens to be an avid thrifter and swapper and Swap Society member. Hi, Maria. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Nicole. I'm so happy to be here.
So where are you talking to us from today, and where are you from originally?
So I'm talking to you today from my cute little bungalow home in San Pedro, South Bay, Los Angeles area in California. And originally, I am from kind of everywhere. I moved a ton as a kid. Born in Connecticut, raised in Seattle, spent some time living in Mexico in grade school. Traveled up to Phoenix and then Houston and then back to Phoenix and then Flagstaff and then Boston. I've lived all over the place, but really the true heart home is here in California. So
amazing. I love it. You're a woman of the world.
Yes.
Of course. Of course you are. So tell us about the work that you do. You know, we've been chatting a little bit online and about kind of the spirituality behind thrifting and secondhand. And so I'm really excited to talk about that. But before we get into that, I just really want to hear a little bit about your background. How did you become a Reiki master and a spiritual healer? I know you're also a singer. So tell us about your journey and how all of this came to be.
Oh, okay. So you're right. I was an opera singer, full-time opera singer, right up until the pandemic hit. And it was so funny because I had been meditating with my meditation guru in the desert in the fall of 2019. So just a few months, right, before we get to the pandemic in March. And I started feeling tingling in my hands. And I had already been doing Reiki with a Reiki master, and I'd been meditating for many months, and I had been working with like energy work through the body, trying to move energy through my body. So it's funny because like 2 weeks before I started feeling the tingling in my hands when I was meditating, I got into a car accident. And so my first thought, it wasn't, I was okay, everyone was okay. It was just, we were T-boned and I was the passenger, and I got hit on my side. And so I was going to chiropractic and acupuncture and massage and all these things. And so when I started feeling the tingling in my hands, I thought, oh man, I have nerve damage. I've broken something. Oh, this is bad, right? But the tingling didn't stop for 3 months, despite getting many adjustments and acupuncture and chiropractic and all those things. And every time I would touch someone in pain, their pain would go away. And I was like, well, this is weird. and so finally I asked my Reiki master, like, hey, what's up with this? And she was like, oh, it sounds like you have Reiki. It sounds like you were universally attuned to Reiki. And I was like, oh. She was like, you should take a class or something. And I was like, okay. So I went and got certified about, I think that was in January of 2020. So now we've gone from the fall of 2020 to January of 2020. I had like 3 months of solid hand tingling weirdness and so much energy flowing through me. I wasn't really sleeping well at night and stuff. It was just very weird. And I get certified in January of 2020 in Reiki 1. And when I went to go to my Reiki 1 class, I learned through the class that, oh yeah, I was definitely accidentally attuned to Reiki, like universally attuned to Reiki. And I guess not really an accident, but more so an amalgamation of like all the things I had been doing in my life had prepared me to be really hyper aware and attuned to this energy field, right? And so I fell in love with Reiki so fast. Oh my gosh, it was like the hardest I've ever fallen for any hot guy in my entire life. I fell harder for Reiki and I loved it so much. And I started really thinking about quitting singing. I was like, I want to devote my whole everything to Reiki. And I'm making all of my money singing right now. And this is really scary because, you know, what do I do? Do I just like give up all of my stability and everything I've worked 20 years for? I had finally gotten to a place right before the pandemic, where I was making all of my money, no extra side gigs, no working in restaurants, no working in offices, like just singing. I was making good money. I was paying all of my bills. I mean, it was good. And I was like, do I give that up? Because I'm so in love with Reiki. And I'm honestly kind of getting burned out on the toxicity of the opera industry. And so I'm humming and I'm hawing and I'm deciding and I'm sweating bullets over it. And then the pandemic hits. And all of my jobs, my singing jobs, go up in smoke. Like $30,000 in canceled contracts overnight. All of my church gigs gone, everything gone. And I was like, okay, universe, I hear you. All right, I guess I'm going to start practicing Reiki. So I gave myself like a solid month to cry and grieve, like everyone did at the beginning of the pandemic. And then I started my life practice. I don't really call it my business. I call it my life practice because I really believe that everything in my life has been leading up to this. So about a month into the pandemic, I started Ascending Arts and started offering Reiki, and I got certified in Reiki 2 and then as a Reiki master, and just kept going with it. So that way I could heal as many people and teach as many people as possible.
Wow, that's such a cool story. And I'm also a singer, and I can absolutely relate
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
Not opera, jazz mostly. A lot of Brazilian jazz. I love bossa nova. Yeah, super, super into that.
Oh my God, I love that.
Like a 20 plus year obsession with Brazilian music. But it's interesting because, and I also was a professional dancer, like just a performer, right? And I feel like, yeah, there have been these phases where I was gigging and singing all the time and doing commercials and also working as a makeup artist and dancing and, having this crazy schedule. So that's so amazing. I never got to the point where I was just 100% singing all the time. That's such an amazing accomplishment because I feel like that's so rare for musicians to kind of find that. But I can really relate to this this feeling, right, of how do I give this up, or how do I do something else, or this is such a big part of me. I've dedicated so much of my life to this. How does everything fit together?
Yes, absolutely. And that I really struggled with when I started my life practice. I really struggled with, like, do I just give up singing altogether? Now, fortunately, I had some time to think about it because the opera industry was totally dead during the pandemic, right? Singers are super spreaders, so there were no gigs, right? So I had plenty of time to figure it out. And what I realized is, this is so beautiful. What I realized is that I had never really loved singing opera. It was just something I was good at that people kept paying me to do. And the reason why I hadn't really loved it is because I hadn't entered into my relationship with opera with squeaky clean energetics. I had entered into my relationship with opera because I was so traumatized from a childhood that we won't talk about right now in this podcast. Maybe, I don't know. I'm a trauma healer, so I'm always an open book. But I was so traumatized from that childhood that I needed, like, literal, visceral, clapping for me. I needed people to approve of me. I needed that, like literal clapping and approval. It was I didn't need it anymore. By the time I got to Reiki, by the time I had received Reiki, I'd done so much of my own healing work that, like, I realized that kind of validation no longer served me and honestly was no longer necessary. And so when I realized, oh gosh, I've entered into this relationship with opera without squeaky clean energetics, and that's why I don't love it anymore, right? Is because I don't think I ever really did. I started thinking about, well, how do I marry singing with Reiki? Do I sing to my Reiki clients? Do I chant and sometimes I do, depending on the session and what the client needs for their energy. I do a little sound healing. But mostly what I finally came to was the conclusion that if Reiki is what lights me up right now, if that's what makes every single thing in my life, if helping others and healing others is what makes every single thing in my life just a little bit more magical and helps me be more present and enjoy, then I just have to give Reiki while I sing. So the opera industry is now starting to open up again. I'm very excited about that. I'm really excited to return to the stage. And I give group Reiki to all the audiences that I sing for now. That's how I choose to infuse my singing with something that I absolutely love. And it has helped me. It's so funny because it's helped me go from this place where I just saw opera as this technical thing that my body can do, and I'm executing it and I'm thinking about just that, right? Just like an athlete might think about their form as they throw a three-pointer basket in a basketball, right? They might be thinking about the way that their arm releases or their wrist flips or whatever, right? I was thinking about my body in that way and my instrument and my music in that way that kind of like removes all the soul from it. But as a jazz singer, I'm sure you know that music can be so transcendent and it can be so healing to yourself as a musician and to the people who get to witness your music. And yet I had taken all the soul out of it. And so now when I give Reiki back, I'm allowing myself not only to give the soul back, which is like me funneling my heart and my love into others, but also I get to really be in the present moment with the music and be in the present moment with my artistry and understand that this is an expression of healing and transcendence. And it has nothing to do with like performance practice that's 600 years old and everyone sings it this way. And this is the technique and you must breathe at this point. And this is the proper diction and all of those things. Mm-hmm. So in fact, Reiki has reinfused my love for opera and possibly actually maybe fall in love with it for the first time ever, which is amazing.
That's so cool. Yeah, I think for me, I think one of the things that I love about singing jazz is that you can, part of it is that you do interpret it in your own way. And it's not about following a specific thing. I feel like that's part of what calls to me for that. And, in my younger years, I had some opportunities where people wanted me to do like a pop album, for example, and that's just not my vibe. And I considered it because I love to sing, but I don't really like to sing the popular stuff as much, I mean, maybe for fun with my kids or something, dancing around the house, right? Or whatever. But like, that was never the part that I was really passionate about. And so what I was worried about was it becoming something that I really didn't love, right? Because if I was doing it in a way that didn't resonate with me. So it was a really hard decision. And sometimes I think, oh, well, what if I had done that and then got through that phase and then did the music that I really wanted? But I feel like that doesn't always happen that way because it's like once you get into that certain area, you kind of can get stuck there. I used to sing a lot of commercials. And I felt the same way because it was like, one of my best paying gigs, I was singing about, chicken and shrimp. And it was like, that's not, I mean, I loved the paycheck, but I was also like, oh, is this really the best way for me to make my living? I don't know. It's tough, man. It's tough being an artist because you have to make these kinds of choices. It can be really challenging.
Absolutely. I always think about the J.G. Wentworth guy, like, oh, bless his heart.
So let's really quickly, before we move away from Reiki, because I know that we're going to talk about the spirituality of secondhand shopping, which I'm so excited to hear your perspective on. But for people that maybe are unfamiliar with what it is, can you just briefly tell us what it is and what it means to be a Reiki master?
Oh, totally. Yeah. So Reiki is a shamanic, Shinto-based Japanese healing practice, an quantum energetic healing practice. It's thousands of years old and was kind of rebranded in the early 1920s as Reiki Ryoho Usui, which is the Reiki that most of us know and practice today. But it has been around for millennia and really around as long as quantum matter has existed. So forever, forever. And what it is, the practitioner places hands on the recipient and funnels life force energy or chi or ki, Reiki, right, into the recipient to help promote their healing and their balance. And, it sounds woo, but if you can check out reiki.org if you're interested in reading more of the scientific studies that have been done on Reiki. It's fascinating. Reiki has been proven in both human and animal trials, to lower cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone, to reduce inflammation, which helps to speed up healing after surgeries, and to help with pain in childbirth. It has been proven to improve theta state and REM sleep. It has been proven to increase, or grow rather, new development on the myelin sheath, the myelin lining on our nerve endings in the autonomic nervous system, which helps to promote a muscle memory. That's where muscle memory is born. And that's how I use it to help people who have trauma stored in their autonomic nervous systems to release it from their nervous systems and heal from their trauma for good. So there's so many things that Reiki can do for us scientifically, and all those beautiful benefits. But really, it's just a matter of funneling quantum energy. And so, broad strokes of quantum mechanics here. You and me and those cute headphones that you're wearing, and my cat, and oxygen, and the stars, everything in existence, everything is all made up at the quantum level of the same matter, just different conglomerations of the same matter. And mind you, quantum physics now is the most proven science on Earth, which means that there have been more studies done to the same conclusions than physics, than chemistry, than biology, right? So we know for a scientific fact that we are living in a quantum universe, and that quantum matter is the building block of existence. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like the Pando aspen forest in Utah, right? It looks like 100,000 trees, or excuse me, it looks like 100 acres, 50,000 trees. And in reality, it's the largest organism on Earth. It's one tree that's united by one root system. I know, right? So cool. And our root system is quantum matter. Existence essentially at the quantum level is all one organism. And so what I'm doing when I'm giving a client Reiki, whether it's via distance or in person, is I am just funneling the matter, the quantum energy that's in everything and in you and all around you into you, just to promote. And if I'm sending life force energy into you, how can you not feel better? How can you not feel physically, spiritually, and emotionally better? Right?
That's so cool. I have had Reiki before, so I'm familiar with how cool it can be and the amazing benefits of it. So if you're listening or watching and you haven't tried it, try it out. Even if it sounds kind of woo or just like, what is this? It doesn't hurt to try, right? You never know what could happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could end up with tingling hands for 3 months by accident. So.
Okay, so now let's start talking about clothes and fashion and secondhand. I can't wait to hear more of your perspective on, how all of this relates to spirituality. How did you get into secondhand and thrifting?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. So I decided many years ago that I was going to stop creating New Year's resolutions for myself that didn't build my life. And so, so many people use New Year's resolutions as an excuse to shame themselves. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted my New Year's resolution to be something that could help me change something, but something that was exciting for me, that I was really going to enjoy, and that was going to feel rewarding for me. So I wouldn't be shaming myself if I fell off of it, because I wouldn't want to fall off of it. Right.
Yeah.
And so about, almost 10 years ago now, I decided to go ethical with my closet for my New Year's resolution. And boy, was it a bear. I've always loved fashion. I think that's one of the main reasons I became an opera singer, is I just love to dress up, right? but so I've always loved fashion. I love fashion as the idea of our ability to express our subconscious, our inner being outwardly for others to see, and how who we are on any given day, and what our energy embodies and what our emotions and spirit embody on any given day changes with our energetic flow. And so the idea of being able to express that outwardly to others through the outfit that you choose was always something that I've really resonated with and always loved. And so it was hard. It was really hard for me to decide to go ethical with my closet. The first thing I did was I started with getting rid of or thrifting or swapping every single piece that I had that wasn't ethically made, that I had purchased non-ethically. And I did that over a span of like 7 years. So I wasn't like, let me just throw everything away and start fresh. That would be insanely wasteful. Right. So instead I said, okay, every time I get a piece that I purchase ethically, that has been ethically made, that I purchase brand new, I will donate one piece of my closet to be swapped or thrifted. And then I noticed that back when I started this 10 years ago, there just were not a lot of beautifully made, interesting, fashion forward, ethically made clothes. There just weren't. It was a lot of hemp sacks that had no shape, and that was kind of it, right? And so I decided, well, it seems like the easiest way for me to go ethical right now, and especially on the budget of an opera singer, is to thrift and swap. And so I said, okay, well, that's what I will do. And I do still occasionally buy new pieces, and add them to my wardrobe that are ethically made. But it's far more rare for me to do that than it is for me to thrift and swap, just because for one, it's a budgetary choice, and for two, it's an ecological and sustainability choice. So,
what happened? I know that you said that it was kind of, your New Year's resolution for yourself, right? That you made, but what happened where you realized that the way that you had been shopping for clothing didn't resonate with you and how you wanted to be present in the world?
mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think I had been kind of ruminating on it in the back of my brain since I think wasn't it in 2013 when there was that big factory collapse where like 1,000 factory workers died, garment workers died, and I believe it was in Bangladesh, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and I had been thinking about that for a couple of years. I think I started, no, I guess it was maybe it was the next year. So 2014, I think, is when I started my ethical closet. So that's not quite 10 years, it's about 7 years, right? But I think, I've been thinking about it since then. And I had told myself, oh, I really should go ethical with my closet. And then I just started thinking like, but it's too expensive. Like I just kept telling myself, but that's too expensive. That's not possible. Like everything is fast fashion these days. Like how am I even going to find anything? And I just kept telling myself these stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why when I decided to make it a New Year's resolution, I was like, this is something you've been wanting for a while. You've made a ton of excuses for yourself as to the reasons why you can't do it. But if you're going to make it a New Year's resolution, like let's do the thing. Like let's just challenge yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. The Rana Plaza tragedy was really, I think for a lot of people, I think that was a moment where a lot of people learned about what was really going on in the fashion industry.
Oh
And
yeah.
and it was such a horrific moment in the world. And it was even what spurred the creation of the nonprofit fashion revolution.
Right.
Obviously, you never want to see a tragedy like that, but I think that there has been some good that's come from it in the sense that, people all around the world have taken notice and stopped turning away from the realities about what really goes into cheap, fast fashion, but not even just cheap, fast fashion. Quite frankly, a lot of fashion, even luxury fashion
Oh
and
yeah.
everything in between. And that, in so many cases, the people who are making our clothes are not living in safe conditions,
Nope.
are not able to make a living wage. They're living in poverty.
They're
And
human trafficked.
modern slavery exists. People are working in slavery right now, largely to make clothes for people in the West that they may never wear, or they might wear once or twice, and then they're going to throw it away. And then it's in a landfill. And then it's a whole other problem and burden on another part of the global South, or many different areas of the global South. One of the things that I'm always trying to do is I am trying to spread this word so that people know and understand what is really happening. I know that personally, I came to the sustainable fashion conversation initially because of the environmental impacts. I learned how polluting the fashion industry was. And this was in 2010. And I was doing a deeper dive into my just personal the way that I'm living on this planet and what am I responsible for? And I know that in environmental circles, there's a lot of conversation about, well, but it's, a few companies are doing the majority of the pollution and it's not really individuals' faults. And, we need to focus the blame and the action on these companies. And I get that. But I also know that as an individual on living on this earth, that I do want to be really mindful about how I'm living on this earth. And I do want to live as sustainably as possible, because I do know that lots of little actions add up. So my own actions add up. My actions do matter. So I don't ever want to diminish individual action or even responsibility for that matter. And then I came to learn about the human rights abuses and the fact that the majority of people working in the fashion supply chain are women and children. And it's kind of, for me, I'm the type of person that once I learn that, I can't support that. I can't be a part of that. I have extracted myself from those types of purchases as much as possible. And I know that living in a modern world in a city, I'm not 100% absolved, right? But it's still, I mean, it's still there, but I'm doing my best and I'm making the effort.
Well, one of the things that you said is this idea about companies, 5 or 6 or whatever, a few large companies who are doing the majority of the polluting. But look, those companies do what they do because it makes them a profit. And I say this all the time to people, and I think they really think I'm being hyperbolic, but I'm not. It's just a numbers game, right? If every single person in the Western world thrifted just half of their clothes, doesn't even have to be all of them. If they just thrifted half of their clothing purchases, the fast fashion industry would crumble. It would be forced to change its ways. So these big companies that are doing all of this polluting would be forced to change their ways if enough people would start to recognize their individual power when we become a collective. Right? And that, I think, is the true message that I like to tell people a lot when it comes to sustainable living or environmentalism or any sort of activism that you feel called to. Be imperfectly activistic, right? Be an imperfect activist, because it can be really hard to put so much pressure on ourselves to be like, well, if I'm going to be ethical with my closet, then I have to be ethical in all these other ways, and I have to recycle all of this, and I have to have a zero carbon footprint, and like all these. Relax. Be imperfectly activist, right? Because if every single person was a little bit more activist, if every single person tried just a little bit more to be mindful about their impact on, like you said, women and children of color, right? Then think about how different this world would be. We can make a difference. We just have to understand that we cannot do it alone. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. If everyone does it, guess what? We get to have the world we want. Just jump on board. Come join us.
I'd love to hear your thoughts about, for your perspective, especially as an energy healer. I think that all things have energy, right? And vibration. I think that some people in some cultures shy away from secondhand because they're concerned about the energy of something. But there's also the energy of the new thing. I'd just love to hear your thoughts about all of that.
Oh, it's such a great question. Oh my gosh. Okay, so first of all, the energy of something new. When you purchase a new item, if you are concerned about the energetic imprint that your clothes will have when you put them on, and you purchase something new, then it is, in my opinion, impossible to separate the ethics of how the clothing was made from the energy that it will imprint on you. If a child living in extreme poverty who has been human trafficked into a place with no light that they work in 20 hours a day, right? They get 4 hours to sleep. If that is the energy with which your clothing is made, how is that better? than the energy of whoever wore it last. Sure, maybe whoever wore it last experienced a broken heart. Maybe they were dumped while they were wearing that top that you're wearing, right? What's the difference for you of the energetic toll that someone getting dumped or a child living in slavery? You pick. Now, if we're talking about clothing that's made ethically, sustainably, slow fashion, made by artisans who are being paid a living wage, who get to stay with their families and make their own schedules and all those things. Great, amazing. Talk about the highest vibes, right? But if you, like me, probably don't have the budget to have an entire wardrobe made of clothes like that, then take the energy of the ancestor of that piece. And this is something that Nicole and I were talking about before we started recording this episode, is I really love the idea of bringing a piece, a thrifted or swapped piece, into my home and imagining I sit with it. I try it on, see if it'll fit, right? But if I decide to keep it, I sit with it and I tell myself a story about it. I tell myself a story like who wore this last? What was she like? What does she do for a living? What are her experiences? What's her heart like? Those kinds of things. I ask myself those stories because I deeply believe in ancestral veneration. Ancestral veneration is a concept where we look at the ancestors of not only our bloodlines and our bodies, but of the land we live on this of the space that we're living in, of ancestors that can be in plants and animals, ancestors that can be in a piece of clothing. We look at the forebearers of each of these energies we come into contact with, and we offer them due respect. And I think in the process of that, even if you're not an energy healer like me, yeah, I could cleanse all of my clothes with Reiki if I want to. I can do that. Reiki pours out of me all the time, though. So when I put it on, it's probably already cleansed. It's fine. But I guess you could sage your clothes if you want to. Go for it. If it makes you feel better, and if it makes you feel like the energy inside of the clothes are purified and ready for only you, absolutely do that. Especially if you happen to be an energetic empath that like a textural empath, or if you happen to be a medium, right? Those things might be important. But I think if we can just sit with the piece, sit with the ancestor of that piece, tell yourself the story about their lives, thank them for the generosity that they had, the generosity of spirit that they had to cause a chain of events that would put this piece of clothing that's going to now shelter and cover you, right, into your hands, onto your lap. They did that for you. Offer the gratitude, offer the veneration. And when you do that, there's no energetic vibration that is low enough that can penetrate that kind of love and gratitude and compassion.
That's so beautiful. I love that perspective. And I think that it really does make me think of our swap community too, because all of us are doing this out of a similar reasoning, right? We are people who don't want to buy the new thing because we're being mindful of people and planet. But we like to express ourselves and have fun with fashion, or maybe our size changes or our lifestyle or whatever our reasoning is for doing this. I love this community that's being built. And even though most of us have never met, maybe a little bit on social media here and there, but we are connecting with one another through sharing our clothing. And so I think it is such an interesting community that is growing. It's really fun to see that.
Touching back in on the Pando forest that we were talking about, that aspen forest in Utah. Cool thing about trees, here's a really interesting fun fact that I just absolutely adore. And that is that trees, when they are sharing an ecosystem, even if they're not the same kind of tree, and they're like in a park, for example, and there's like a bunch of trees in a park you take your kids to, right? trees can sense through the nutrients in the earth through their root systems when a nearby tree in their ecosystem is suffering from a lack of nutrients. And they will actually divert nutrients from their own root systems back into the ground in the direction of the suffering tree to give it more nutrients. I mean, wow. The things we could learn from trees if we would just pay attention and just do what they do, right? But think about what I said about quantum matter being the root system for existence, that existence is one giant organism. How are we ministering to and preserving the health of our organism? How are we helping the nutrient deficient cells in our organism? And those nutrient deficient cells are our planet right now, our child slaves, are women of color who are enslaved and trafficked. There are so many parts of our organism that are filled with dis-ease, disease, right? How do we redirect our nutrients to help our resources to help those parts of our organism that are suffering?
I love that perspective. And I think that it does kind of go back to that individual action, right? How we can each make our own choices, and that, cumulatively, we really can make an impact, and a very positive impact. And I love that perspective of, yes, like, let's create this world that we really want to have, together.
Yeah, my best friend Crystal says it all the time to me, especially in moments where I can get a little hopeless sometimes. I'm like, oh, it's just the problems of the world are so big. And she says, Maria, what do I always say? I'm like, yes, you're right. Think globally, act locally. And she's like, yes, think globally, act locally. When we act from our individual sphere and we create that impact here, it ripples outward. And that has become the mission of my entire life practice. That's what I do as a Reiki healer is I work very hard towards the ripple effect of the healing of others in the hopes that it will help to usher in utopia. And that may make me a dreamer and it may make me naive and it may make me literally utopian, but I'll take it. I will take that because I would rather have hope in the future that we can make together than to lose hope and just let the jackal consume all of us.
Mm-hmm. So, one thing that you may or may not be aware of is that a lot of our Swap Society members are performers, singers, actors, dancers, artists of some type. And I'd be curious to hear your perspective on that. If you're surprised or not surprised to hear that, and why you think that might be.
I mean, I am surprised to hear it. And I think my first initial thought was, when are we having a Swap Society cabaret?
Yes, please.
Swap Society talent show. But that was my first thought. But no, I mean, I think my hunch is that you're a very dynamic person and you are a performer yourself. And you are the kind of person in all of my interactions with you, I can tell that you have the energy of someone who is easily lovable and easily supported by her friends and her community. So my guess is that a lot of your swappers started out as your friends who were like, hell yeah, Nicole has a business. Let me support that. Right. But then, like, honestly, like attracts like. Energy responds to energy. We're all mirrors for each other. So I found Swap Society randomly. You and I weren't friends before I started swapping and becoming one of your members of Swap Society. But we have formed an online friendship over the years of me supporting your business and you supporting my ethical closet. And it's something that I think when we put our energy out into the universe in a certain way, when we are authentically ourselves in every possible iteration, we call our people to us. And it seems like you've called a lot of your people to you through this business.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I love it. It's such a beautiful way to think about it. I also think that part of it might be that perhaps we're more sensitive as artists.
Oh yeah.
Maybe as artists, so a lot of us are more sensitive to kind of the feelings and emotions of others. But I also think there's a little bit of that. And you mentioned this earlier, you like to dress up and wear beautiful dresses, right? I think a lot of us, maybe especially if we're performers, clothing is a part of how we're getting into a character or a mood or a vibe, right? And so we want to feel a certain way or be in the world in a certain way. Maybe we just like more variety because of that, right? Because we're always morphing and shape shifting into these other things. So I think there's a little bit of that too, which brings me to a question that I always love to ask in these interviews, which is, do you have a favorite piece in your closet? What is it and why do you love it?
Oh my gosh. Do I have a favorite piece in my closet? I'm sure I do. Oh, I know exactly which one. It's a jacket. It is a ridiculously gorgeous jacket by my friend, who's actually a designer here in Los Angeles. And she was an opera singer turned fashion designer, and she does all slow fashion, all ethically made by hand here in Los Angeles. She supports a beautiful seamstress in LA who makes all of her clothes. And yeah, and they're like family. They're really close. But anyway, the brand is called By Vinick, and it is a jacket. It's an opera coat, so it's very, very fancy, like very
Mm,
formal coat. But yeah, it's reversible. It's just beautiful. I can send you a picture if you ever want to see it. But like, it's
please.
really, oh my God, it's my favorite. And whenever I put it on, I feel like I am transported into an entirely different world, into a different time. It's the fabric is antique. It was ethically thrifted, antique fabric, and then made into this beautiful garment, and it's just stunning.
It sounds beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's my favorite. But my so anyone who knows anything about my business, my life practice knows that I have a 3 month long one-on-one healing container called the Phoenix Rising. And my favorite pictures that I've ever taken for any sort of promo marketing thing are the Phoenix Rising photos. And I mean, when you go to my Instagram, you'll see them. They'll stand right out to you. It's just all fire and like ash and
They're
just
amazing.
like so epic. And I absolutely love what I'm wearing in that photo shoot. And that is one of the dresses I got on Swap Society. So,
I love it. I love that. I love seeing all of those videos and those photos. They're so powerful and fun. There's just so much energy and intention behind them. That's really beautiful,
yeah.
instead of just the flat standard stuff that we, might normally see on Instagram. So that's so beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
What's inspiring you these days?
Presence. Presence is inspiring me these days. The more present that I can be, uh, the more in this moment that I can be, especially for someone who has suffered so much trauma and for someone who struggled for a very long time with pretty intense anxiety. And I still have my bouts time and again, but presence has for me been the most transformative tool for helping me to overcome the worries and the fears and the doubts that come with life's challenges. Have you ever heard of Byron Katie?
Mm-mm.
Okay, she's basically like the Titch Not Han of Malibu. she
Oh,
she lives
okay.
here in LA, and yeah, and she's a mindfulness instructor teacher, and she wrote about she's the one who invented quote unquote the work. And the work
Mm,
is a series of 4 questions that you ask yourself. Number one, is it true? Number two, can I be absolutely sure that it's true?
mm,
Number three, given that it were potentially hypothetically true, how does that make me feel? And number four, how can I take that truth and turn it on its head to create new feelings for myself? When I first encountered her work, it was probably about 2 years ago now. She blew my mind. I was like, what is this magic? It's amazing. Presence, but like really logical presence. The idea
Mm.
is that anxiety can only live in the past or the future. It cannot live in the present. Fear cannot live in the present. It can only live in the past or the future.
Mm.
We are taking moments of pain from the past and projecting them onto our present moment with an expectation of what will happen in our future. But are we actually unsafe right now? Is
Mm.
anything actually going wrong right now? No, I'm safe. I'm here in my body. I'm speaking to you. Everything's fine. I
Mm.
might have worries about the future, but that's a story I'm telling myself. It hasn't even happened yet. Can't be sure that it will,
Mm-hmm.
right? So presence has been the thing right now that really inspires me, not only because it helps me to maintain a semblance of peace and tranquility, but also because it's where I find deep pleasure and joy. Mindful living is all about presence. And after meditating every day for like 6 years now, 5 years now, mindfulness has become something I do all day long. And that presence of the moment can really, it makes every single mundane, tiny little thing in life so much more special and so much more, for lack of a better word, cute.
That's so lovely. I'll have to check her out.
We have to carve out the moments in the ways that we can. And I think this is something that becomes a block for so many of us with regards to living that mindful life and meditating and making those time for our practices and or the times for our practices and all of that is that we think it has to look a certain way. We've given ourselves an expectation for what it has to be. That movement through meditation has to be yoga, or it has to be a walking meditation in a maze, or things like that, right? Or some people think that meditation has to be sitting on a cushion with your eyes closed and your hands in a mudra and your legs are crossed, right? Like meditating can be anything, usually, except for this morning because I was a little bit in a rush and we were getting ready to start our call. But usually, my matcha making situation is totally a meditation. I take time to like smell the matcha. I try and smell the grass. Like I sift it and I listen to the sound of the sifting. I pour the hot water on and I give thanks for the ancestor of water who comes straight to my tap, unlike my ancestors who had to walk miles and miles and miles to get water from a well, right? I as I whisk the matcha, right? I listen to the whisking sound and I feel like the feeling of the bristles traveling up through the water into my hand. It's like a very, very tactile feeling that I find incredibly pleasurable, right? And then as I'm frothing the milk, I am thanking all the gods and the whole entire existence of gods that I have electricity to froth my milk because I really like it to be frothy. And I couldn't stand pouring cold milk in. And thank God also for oat milk. It's amazing, right? Like practicing gratitude, all of those things as I make the matcha. And then when I take that first glorious caffeinated filled drink, I let it flow down my throat and I feel the warmth as it like spreads through my chest and really have a moment with my body. It's just matcha for Christ's sake, right? Like it doesn't have to be that big of a deal, but if you choose to make it, you just meditated for 10 minutes while you were making and drinking your matcha.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. You did it. You meditated today, right? Like while you're pushing your children on the swings at the park, every push, imagine pushing them into the next phase of joy in their life. Imagine, helping usher into them more mindfulness, whatever it is, and you're meditating with every push. So anything can be a meditation. And I think that when we remember that, when we remember that we can remove the expectation for ourselves of what mindful living looks like, what meditation looks like, what taking time for ourselves looks like, everything can be time. We can be constantly resting while doing everything because we're present.
You mentioned earlier, sometimes you feel hopeless and you have a friend that kind of helps you reconnect with, you know, refocusing you basically, right? Think
Mm-hmm.
globally, act locally. I love that. But the world does seem really crazy right now. I mean, there have always been periods of instability and craziness, but it feels to me right now, as a person living in the world today, that there's really a lot going on. And so I ask everyone at the end of each interview, what's making you feel optimistic?
My clients make me feel optimistic. I watch these absolutely incredible people transform themselves on the daily. I mean, they come to me with some of the worst trauma that you have ever seen or heard of, and they self heal with, yes, my assistance, but they're really the ones doing it. You have to want to, right? And then they take that healing and I just watch it transform their entire lives. Every single person they interact with, their families, their friends, their coworkers, their communities, and they inspire others to do the same. And then they inspire others to do the same. It is exactly that ripple effect that I was talking about earlier that is giving me hope right now and making me believe in our capacity as a species, because truthfully, we all know something's very wrong. No one's in disagreement about that. Doesn't matter what your politics are or where you believe the wrongs can be laid, whose feet they are supposed to be laid at, right? We can all agree that something's very wrong here. And I think if we are really honest with ourselves and we take a look at why, we will see that all of the problems that we have come from all of the healing that we won't do. And when I watch my clients fight against just unbelievable odds, things that seem insurmountable, and they really just conquer everything, that's when I believe, like, oh, okay, if they can do it, anyone can. This whole world can.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with us today. It's been such an absolute pleasure hearing your perspective on everything and learning about your journey. How can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is at Ascending Arts, ASCENDINGARTS. Or you can find me on my website, which is www.ascendingarts.exchange. And I'm much better on those two. Not so great on Facebook, but you can find me on Facebook and TikTok as well, although that's really, really new and nobody wants to really follow me on TikTok yet. But it's really just a lot of recycled reels from Instagram. But
Same.
Yeah, if you want to know me really well, my Instagram is the place to do that.
Well, I wish you the most spectacular day. And thank you again. We'll have to do that Swap Society Cabaret sometime.
Yes, amazing. I can't wait. And if I were going to leave your listeners with anything, if you take nothing else away from me, it is this: be an imperfect activist. Truly. Stop shaming yourself for the ways in which you are incapable of making an impact right now. Please, your shame does not help anything. It doesn't grow anything. It doesn't build anything. Shame is the most useless emotion in the human lexicon of emotions. All it does is destroy. Don't shame yourself. Just do a little better every day. And together, we will build the world that we want.
Thank you for listening to the Swap Society podcast. Swap Society is an online clothing swap for women and kids that makes it easy and affordable to mix up your wardrobe sustainably. We're a growing community of women across the USA who are creating positive change by swapping our clothes and slowing down our fashion consumption. We would love to swap with you. If you're interested in joining, you can sign up at our website. Learn more at www.swapsociety.co. That's swapsociety.co. You can find the show notes for each episode on our website. Please get in touch with us on social media too. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and YouTube for the video version of this podcast at Swap Society. Music is by Joel Korolitz and yours truly. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Please help us spread the word by subscribing, leaving a rating and review, sharing on social media, or simply telling a friend. We really appreciate your support. Have a wonderful day, and remember to swap before you shop.